Okay, so this is a sacromere. We'll learn more about what that means in a second. But basically, it's part of your skeletal muscles. So this little yellow thing on top is called a neuron, the twisty one. And this is where electrical impulses from your brain come in, and they come from your brain in order to go to the muscles to make the muscles move. The zigzag yellow line down here is called a neuromuscular junction, and the neurotransmitter molecules are released from the neuron and they bind to the receptors in the neuromuscular junction, which depolarizes the membrane of the muscle fiber. So that sounds like a lot of mumbo jumbo, but basically what it means is that the electrical signal that comes from the brain travels through your neuron and through the neuromuscular junction to a T tubule, which opens up a calcium storage. And that's what all these little blue things are down here. They're calciums. So that signal from your brain releases the calciums that are down here, and they're going to travel into the sacromere down here. So let's open up our next picture really quick. So this is the inside of our sacromere. These purple and pink and blue little squiggly lines are actins. This red line with the black beads on it is myosin. The two outside edges of our sacromere are called the Z lines, and then this red line down the middle is the M line. The actins are attached to the Z line, and the myosin is attached to the M line. So those calciums that were stored up there in the sarcoplasmic reticulum are going to be released, and they're going to be attached to the actins. So whenever we want to use our muscles, most people know that those muscles contract. And in order for those muscles to contract, we need the myosin and the actin to connect to each other, which will eventually make our whole sacromere shorten. And we'll get more detailed here in a second. So the actin has two proteins on it. This purple line that goes around it is called tropomyosin, and these little blue dots are called troponin. So the calcium is going to be released, and it's going to attach to the troponin, the troponin, yeah. And when it attaches to the troponin, it tightens basically the tropomyosin and the troponin around the actin, and it allows a binding site to be exposed. And whenever this binding site is exposed, it allows these little black dots on the end of the myosin to attach to the actin. And so the binding site is where the myosin attaches to the actin. So in order for the whole sacromere to shorten, we want the myosin to pull on the actin, which will eventually make the whole sacromere shorter, or thinner, however it is you're looking at it. So in order for the myosin to attach to the actin, we have to have an energy source. And a form of, I think it's ADP and phosphate, give the myosin the energy to reach up and attach to the actin, and then pull it. So that whole action is being allowed from the phosphate and the ADP. And then in order for the myosin to release, let go of the actin and to like relax so that it can grab another section and pull, you have to have ATP. So the little black parts will attach to maybe this section of the actin one time using the ATP and the phosphate. And it will attach here, and it's going to pull this way, making this whole side of the sacromere shorten and go this way. And while that's happening on this side, the same thing is happening on this side. So it's still attached using the ATP and the phosphate. And then in order for our myosin to detach, it needs ATP. And so ATP is released, and it allows the myosin to let go of the actin. And once the myosin lets go, it can grab in another section, say right here is the second section it grabs onto, and it's going to pull it again using the ATP and the phosphate. Again, making the two Z lines come shorten and come in towards the M line. Depending on what kind of physical activity you're going in, the muscles are going to contract at a certain amount. And so your myosin is going to need to reattach to the actin however many times depending on what you're doing physically. Another thing I want to mention is wherever these little black dots attach to the actin, it's called a binding site, or not just a binding site, it's called a cross bridge also. So I want to pull up a little video really quick on how that myosin pulls the actin so we can see a little bit more of what I'm talking about. Here it is. So before I play it, here's our myosin and here's our actin. And so we're just going to see, I'm going to show you a little bit more in detail how the myosin pulls the actin. So it attaches and it pulls it, and then it releases, attaches in a new place and pulls, just like that. So let's go back to our picture. So yeah, that's basically how this works. Once the sacromere shortens, that is the contraction of the muscles. And then if you are, not being physically active anymore, say you're sleeping, then you're not going to be needing to contract any muscles, and your myosin is not going to be attached to the actin. It's going to be released. So there's this thing called rigor mortis, which is where a dead body can be frozen in an awkward position. So say someone dies with their hands in the air. That's not very normal. Someone doesn't have the energy to hold their hands above their head if they're dead, right? Well, remember how we said you need ATP to release that myosin from the actin? Well, if you're dead, you don't have any ATP. You don't produce any ATP, so you can't release the myosin from the actin. You can't let go if there isn't any ATP to do so. So the myosin can be attached to the actin at the time of death, and if there's no ATP in order to release it, your muscles are going to be frozen in that position wherever they are once you die. And yes, at a certain point, I think the muscles will relax when it goes into decay and things like that. They'll fall back down. But that's basically how rigor mortis works. So, thanks for listening.